the Cruiserweight Championship matches are honestly probably best part of the, not the best part, I mean, they are the best part of the kickoff shows, but they're honestly probably better off being a part of the kickoff until they, merge with NXT. And I might as well mention this here now, too. So there was a rumor last week that might have come out after I recorded the show. I don't remember because otherwise I feel like I would have talked about it. But 205 Live and Triple H refused to either agree or confirm or deny, whatever. But he did give a very interesting statement. I forgot to who. But he said something along the lines of 205 Live being merged into NXT as opposed to SmackDown, which was the original rumor a couple months ago. That when SmackDown moves to Fridays on Fox, that 205 Live would be folded in either into SmackDown or whatever, or just disbanded entirely. I don't think 205 Live honestly needs to remain a thing. Personally, what I would do, and I've been saying this for a few weeks, months now, I would have 205 Live go live on Wednesdays before NXT. Now, they have Full Sail University, or even go live after NXT, because I feel like people would be more inclined to stick around at Full Sail after the NXT taping to watch 205 Live than the SmackDown tapings on Tuesdays, where the crowds are fucking dead. This week's show was abysmal. And the wrestling was decent. It wasn't anything great per usual. There usually is great wrestling is what I'm saying, but this week's show just was devoid of it for whatever reason. But the crowd sucked. The crowd was terrible. And it's hard to blame them when they don't know any of these guys and they don't care about the storylines and they're not following the show. They're just there. They're just there to stick around for the post-show dark match or dark segment or whatever. They're not sticking around for 205 Live more often than not. Even though the 205 Live guys do a great job of getting the crowd invested in their matches and getting people into the storylines and getting people to chant 205 or this is awesome, that warms my heart whenever I hear that chant or whenever I see people get engaged, get involved, get into 205 Live, despite not, regularly watching the program. That was not the case this week. And that's not a weekly thing. Usually they do a pretty good job of getting people into the show. This week, though, really opened my eyes like, wow, they need to get the show the fuck off of Tuesdays and the fuck off these SmackDown tapings. Now, people have been saying that now for over 2.5 years, almost 3 years. 205 Live has been around since November of 2016. And it remains after Tuesdays or after SmackDown on Tuesdays in the same building in front of the same fans, which is the dumbest thing they could do for that show. And again, this is nothing new, but 205 Live, if it wants to survive, needs to go back to Full Sail University. And I say go back to Full Sail because that's, that was the venue that hosted the Cruiserweight Classic 3 years ago. And they were super hot for that action, and the Cruiserweights got over huge in front of that crowd. And again, the Cruiserweight Classic was something special. Not to say the crowd would be crazy for the Cruiserweights every single week like they were back then, but needless to say, I think the crowds at Full Sail would care a lot more about the Cruiserweights than the current crowds do after SmackDown. That's just a fact. So hopefully that's what happens. I'm not expecting that to happen. Triple H made it sound like 205 Live, or at least the Cruiserweight division, 205 Live would end, and then the Cruiserweights would be merged into NXT, which isn't the worst idea, but I don't think it needs to be. And I've said before, putting the Cruiserweight title matches would be a better idea than putting them on the WWE pay-per-view shows. Because if they have zero exposure on Raw or on SmackDown, then why would they expect these crowds to give two shits about the Cruiserweights? They just can't. So I think they're better off doing their own thing, either as part of NXT or, again, what I would do is air 205 Live either before NXT at 7 p.m. on the network at Full Sail before NXT goes live at Full Sail. And that was never a possibility before because NXT didn't air live. And 205 Live would have to be taped, once a month like NXT. And it just wouldn't have worked if they were still going to be a part of the WWE pay-per-view shows. But if they're not going to be a part of the pay-per-views going forward, and they might merge into NXT, I would keep the Cruiserweight division separate from NXT. Now, it's not, again, a terrible idea because it gives NXT more talent to work with, helps NXT fill out the 2 hours on Wednesdays, so it's not all just squash matches, but they already have enough championships and enough people on their roster where I feel like they don't need the Cruiserweights. Now, granted, there's not many Cruiserweights to begin with. They already, this might be outdated by the time it goes up. I feel like on the first NXT show, they would have said something about 205 Live, soon coming to NXT, and that very well might be a possibility. So if so, feel free to skip ahead by a couple minutes, or I'm sorry for wasting your time on this subject. But I really feel like 205 Live can continue to exist on its own without NXT on Wednesdays, either before the show or after NXT. I don't really see what the issue with that would be. And having the crowd sit through 3 hours of NXT and 205 Live really isn't a lot to ask, considering a lot of these same people would sit through multi-hours of NXT TV tapings, once a month. So once a week for 3 hours really isn't that big of a deal. And if the show is good, then who gives a shit? It's not Raw, it's not even SmackDown, it's 205 Live, which is almost always excellent every single week. That's what I would do. That's merely my opinion. But we'll see what they do. I do think they will close down 205 Live and merge it into NXT, which I think is a better idea than merging into SmackDown, which, at one point a few years ago, I wouldn't have minded, but SmackDown's roster now is so much bigger that they just don't have time for that stuff. They don't have time for certain people as it is. I saw Aleister Black and Buddy Murphy had a match before SmackDown last night for the dark match, or, before SmackDown on Tuesday as a dark match. What the fuck is up with that? Both those guys should be on the show as it is. So hopefully they give more time to those guys after the wild card rule is disbanded and they have their own unique roster. But what I'm saying is they just don't have time for the Cruiserweights. They would get a 5-minute match on the show. It's just not a good combo. Have them under the creative control, as they have been for a while now, of Triple H, and put them with the NXT brand. Maybe not on NXT, which again is fine, but I think what would be better would be to keep 205 Live separate from NXT and just air it, back-to-back with NXT on Wednesdays. They had that as a, I think maybe late last year when they had the, that show. What the fuck was it called? Mixed Match Challenge on Tuesdays. 205 Live was still taped, I think, before SmackDown, but they aired it on Wednesdays before NXT. It was like, for a while there was NXT UK, 205 Live, not Mixed Match Challenge, that was on Tuesdays. 205 Live, NXT UK, NXT, and Mae Young Classic, all in the same day for WWE, which was fucking nuts. But it was great because all the shows were awesome, so I would love to see them go back to that, but I'm not holding my breath.